Angel Dust is an essential character of the Hazbin Hotel story, but this altered timeline is about how Molly being sent to hell instead of angel dust could play out. So anyways, Anthony passes away from a drug overdose in 1947. His twin sister Molly was utterly devastated at his loss. Though she understands that his death was a result of his own choices, she couldn't help but place the blame squarely on her father and surviving older brother. To Molly, they were the ones who had driven Anthony to this tragic end. Her family, bound by blood and circumstance, just unravels in Molly's eyes, and consumed by her anger and grief, she severs all ties with them. Since women in this time period were expected to be married by the age of 30, let's just assume that Molly has a husband. Throughout the following years, Molly tries to move on, to bury the hurt by playing the part of the dutiful wife. But the loss of her twin, whom she considered half of her own soul, was a wound that refused to heal. Every milestone, every event that should have brought her joy, was tinged with the sorrow of Anthony's absence. Her unresolved grief began to eat away at her, straining her relationship with her husband and friends, causing them to distance themselves from her. With her marriage ended, her family ties severed, her friends gone, and her grief an ever-present weight on her heart, Molly felt completely and utterly alone. Her isolation became unbearable, and she eventually made the irreversible decision to end her life, believing that in death she might find some measure of peace and even reunite with her twin. However, Molly doesn't find herself in the peaceful afterlife that she had imagined. She found herself in hell, a place she never expected to be. Confused and disoriented, Molly wanders the boisterous city, trying to understand what had brought her here. She couldn't remember committing any act so terrible that it would have damned her to such a place. Unlike her father and brothers, she had been kept out of anything to do with the criminal activities that defined her family. Sure, she hadn't been entirely ignorant of the shady dealings of her family, but Anthony had always protected her, warning her that the less she knew, the safer she would be. Over the following years, Molly wanders hell, searching for any trace of her twin. She visits every corner of Pentagram City, asking every soul she meets if they had seen anyone who looked like Anthony, but no one had heard of him and no one could offer her any hope, causing desperation to gnaw at her. Even when people point out their twin brother had likely been lost to one of Hell's annual exterminations, she would insist that she knows her brother still existed somewhere. One day, unexpectedly, Molly runs into her elder brother. He is now known as Arachnus and had become a powerful and fearsome figure within Hell. The two siblings hadn't spoken to each other since the day Molly had cut ties with the family. Arachnus is surprised to see his baby sister in Hell, but Molly's anger is still too raw to be happy to see him. Despite their fractured relationship, Molly can't help but ask if Arachnus had any news of Anthony being in Hell. To her disappointment, Arachnus hadn't heard anything. This suggests one thing: Anthony wasn't in Hell. He was in heaven, a possibility that Molly had never considered. Realizing that they are separated not just by death but by entire worlds, Molly feels a crushing sense of loss. She gives up her search, resigning herself to the reality that she would never see Anthony again. The years pass in a blur, with her days in Hell marked by routine and survival, rather than hope. One night, as she's returning to her small, dilapidated apartment, she is approached by a group of male demons. Before things can escalate, a voice cuts through the darkness. Cherry Bomb, a notorious figure in Hell, intervenes, grabbing Molly's hand and pulling her away. "I see those Durangos haven't learned their lesson from last time," Cherry said with a smirk, flicking her hair in amusement. "Those dickheads love to get handsy with any girl who catches their eye. That's why we girls gotta stick together." The two women become fast friends, bonding over their shared experiences in Hell and their mutual distrust of the men who dominated its brutal hierarchy. Though not a born fighter, Molly discovers that she has a unique talent for summoning firearms and knives. It was a skill that seemed to manifest naturally in her demon form. Growing up with two brothers who were trained in weaponry, she had also learned how to handle small firearms and knives for self-defense. It doesn't take long for her and Cherry to carve out a reputation for themselves, attracting other female demons who were tired of being preyed upon by the stronger male demons. Soon they form a gang of their own, a force to be reckoned with within hell. Despite their newfound power and notoriety, Molly finds herself often gazing at the sky, lost in thoughts of Anthony. She couldn't shake the feeling that he was somewhere, living a life that she couldn't even imagine. One day Cherry catches sight of her staring up at heaven, deep in thought. "Come on, you bitch," Cherry said, a smirk playing on her lips. "I know that look. What's going on in that head of yours?" Molly sighed, not wanting to burden her friends with her complicated feelings. "It's nothing," she muttered defensively. "Yeah, right," Cherry replied, her voice softer but still laced with sarcasm. "You get all gloomy every time you look up at heaven. I could tell something's eating at you." She paused for a moment, glancing away before her fiery gaze returned. "Just tell me. You can trust me," she added. Molly hesitates, her eyes darting to the ground as if weighing whether to speak. But Cherry's persistence finally broke through the wall she had built around herself. "I don't talk about it much, but my family was, well, it was messed up," Molly stated, her voice barely above a whisper. "My twin brother, Anthony, he wasn't like my father and older brother. He was into guys, and that didn't sit well with our family." She paused, the words clearly painful to say. "In the time I'm from, being different, it was a death sentence. Papa kept Tony close to him, and beat the rest out of him." Molly's voice wavered, but she kept going. "I watched him get torn apart bit by bit until he couldn't take it anymore. He started using drugs, and one night he overdosed." The weight of her words hung in the air like a storm ready to break. Cherry's face softened, her usual bravado slipping away for a moment. "Damn, that's rough. I didn't know." "After I died," Molly continued, her voice heavy and full of regret, "I tried to find him here in hell, but I couldn't. And don't tell me he may have been caught in an extermination. I know he hasn't been erased." She took a shaky breath, glancing away. "Since I haven't found him here, that means Tony must have made it to heaven." Cherry tilted her head, surprised. "Wait, you're serious? Heaven?" Molly nodded, her gaze distant as if lost in a memory. "Yeah, I always thought that if I could just see him one more time, I could tell him how sorry I am, that I couldn't protect him." Her voice wavered, the weight of guilt weighing down hard. "I was his twin, you know. I should have been there for him. I should have said something, should have to Pops. But I just couldn't." She swallowed, her words heavy with the pain that was left unsaid. Cherry was quiet for a moment before offering a small smile. "Well, there is that hotel, the one the princess is trying to put together. She assumes it will help sinners become better people and get into heaven. I'm not into any of this self-motivation and reflection bullshit, though you never know, maybe she's onto something with that redemption crap." Molly wasn't convinced, but something about Cherry's words lingered. Could redemption, if possible, offer her a chance to reunite with Anthony? After much thought, she decided to visit the hotel and see for herself. When Molly arrives at the hotel, Charlie welcomes her with open arms. With Angel's timeline in the canon story, he currently has no reason to reveal a twin sister even existed, and considering Val, he isn't exactly in the position to do so either. With Molly in Angel's timeline, she isn't constrained and thus could reveal that she does have a brother in heaven. As the months passed, Molly found herself fitting in with the hotel's strange but endearing crew. Yet her past soon catches up with her. Stories of her violent escapades as a gang leader spread throughout hell, and detractors use it to discredit Charlie's mission. Despite this, Charlie stands by Molly, believing that everyone deserves a second chance, no matter their past. Much of Season 1 plays out like it does in the story, only Molly is there, not Angel. The only episode that would not be canon is Masquerade, as Molly wouldn't be involved with Valentino. With a little over a month left until Adam's new biannual extermination, Charlie convinces her father to arrange a meeting with Heaven. Cherry arrives at the hotel to see Molly and informs her that their gang has grown restless with Molly's absence, and some of them are accusing her of abandoning them. While she has explained that Molly did have a good reason to take part in the hotel, she does need to meet with the rest of the girls to confirm this. Charlie overhears this conversation and assumes it's a meet and mingle situation before telling the other hotel mates that Molly's friend Cherry is taking them out for drinks. Cherry at first starts to object, but changes her mind after Charlie hands her some money for a night out. At the bar, Cherry and Molly attempt to work things out with the rest of their gang. Husk and Penchus hang out to keep Nifty out of trouble, though Husk also keeps an eye on the girl gang in case things get chaotic. While Molly is able to explain that she is only part of the hotel because she is hoping to reunite with someone she cares about, the rest of the gang members are skeptical about the hotel and its mission. Molly then tells her former cohorts that in a month's time, Adam will launch his extermination. As they speak, Princess Morningstar is in heaven to get them to consider redemption as a better option than launching open season on any demons they come across. This isn't the time to question whether redemption is something that could happen. This is the time they should start preparing themselves for the upcoming attack. If they don't want to be part of this, then their group is disbanded and all of them, Cherry included, can do as they see fit. Velvet, who is a member of Molly's gang, stands up and feels it's time they bring the fight to heaven for once. The gang members who agree with her choose to leave. The rest of the girl gang choose to stay under Cherry's leadership, but only until the upcoming extermination is ended. After that, they feel they should go their separate ways. In the meantime, after arriving in heaven with Vaggie, Charlie takes notice of a male spider-themed winner among the crowd of former human souls that exist in heaven. Something about him reminds her of Molly, leading Charlie to believe that this must be Anthony. During the trial, Charlie brings up Molly as a candidate for redemption. She also informs the assembled council that Molly has a brother in heaven known as Anthony, and suggests that he should be brought in as a character witness. Adam had never considered that perhaps one of the sinners Charlie had at her hotel could have had family in heaven. He attempts to argue against this, but all of his excuses for why Anthony shouldn't speak for his sister come off as weak. Sarah also objects to the idea of involving souls that have entered heaven into council affairs. While Charlie doesn't deny that Anthony's testimony might be outdated due to how much time has passed since he had died, it would still be valid because he would be someone who did know Molly when she was alive. Plus, it would prove that not all souls who enter hell are as unholy as heaven assumed. Knowing that she's being put on the spot, Sarah reluctantly requests that Anthony is summoned to the courtroom. Since Anthony has never needed to create his angel dust persona, he isn't the crass-talking porn star we know him to be in the series. He is invited to speak about who Molly was when she was alive, and the impression he gives is of someone who is worthy of entry into heaven. Adam is at a loss about this and tries to use the person Molly is now to discredit Anthony's testimony, but he finds he is losing the argument. Lute attempts to salvage things in their favor by informing all assembled that Molly had taken her own life, which is viewed as a mortal sin in the eyes of heaven. Charlie counters this by saying that Molly was in mourning due to the loss of her twin brother. Surely they must understand how grief can affect people. Adam, however, says he wouldn't know as he had never mourned for anyone, not even Abel. The trial turns to a heated debate about heaven's judgment and whether souls could truly change. Charlie continues to argue that if Anthony could make it into heaven, then there was hope for Molly. Sarah, the head of the angelic council, maintains that heaven's rules were absolute, all the while cracks in heaven's moral authority are beginning to show. Anthony, who had been listening quietly to most of the proceedings, requests to speak. "I know my sister," he says. "Why did she deserve life in hell? I admit I have been ordered to do things I'm not proud of, terrible things, things that should have damned me, and yet I'm here, and she's not. How is that a fair judgment?" The council goes silent, with Sarah struggling to find a response, as this admission indicates that heaven made a mistake. Charlie jumps on this and realizes that heaven doesn't have any clue about how souls get into heaven. Getting fed up with everything, Adam reveals that when he leads his new extermination, the hotel will be his first target. Both Anthony and Sarah's younger sister Emily are taken aback by this news, as neither of them had heard of heaven launching attacks upon the souls in hell. Sarah tries to explain that this was a decision that she hadn't made lightly, but it was for the good of heaven. When Vaggie protests this, Adam reveals to Charlie and Anthony that Vaggie is actually a former exorcist, purely out of spite. Both Charlie and Vaggie are forcibly returned to hell, while Anthony is also expelled from heaven, both for revealing that he is actually a sinner, and also so he can't reveal knowledge about the extermination to any of the other winners. When the trio find themselves in hell, Charlie is upset about how the trial didn't go as planned. She is also distressed at learning that Vaggie hid the fact that she was an exorcist during the 3 years they had been lovers. Seeing Anthony as a momentary distraction from Vaggie, Charlie immediately apologizes for everything that has happened. If she had known he would be expelled from heaven because of it, she wouldn't have requested that he give testimony about his sister. Anthony, however, isn't bothered by being expelled, because any world that doesn't allow his sister isn't heaven to him. Charlie doesn't look at Maggie but orders her to fill in everyone about the trial as she needs to be alone. Everyone returns to the hotel. Molly is surprised and overjoyed to see her twin brother, but is also confused as to why he is in hell. Maggie says it's a long story, but she will explain what's going on. Everyone is filled in about the events in heaven, including Anthony's expulsion. They are all left wondering about what should be done regarding this. Alistair uses this moment to make a deal with Charlie so he can inform her that angels can actually be killed off. Baggy is horrified that Charlie has made a deal with Alistair. Charlie tells Baggy that Alistair informed her that Carmilla Carmine had managed to kill an exorcist in the extermination earlier that year. Baggy should meet with her to learn how this was done. After Charlie and Alistair leave to travel to Cannibal Town for reinforcements, Baggy informs everyone else in the hotel that they are free to run for it, since they didn't agree to be part of a war zone, only for everyone to loyally stay to fight. The battle against the exorcist is fierce, with Molly's gang, Rosie's cannibals, and the hotel's inhabitants joining forces. Though they suffer heavy losses, including Sir Pentious, they ultimately emerge victorious, defeating Adam and his army. After the battle, the hotel was rebuilt and Cherry Bomb decides to stay at the hotel, while Molly's former gang members went their separate ways. As Molly and Anthony stand together at the newly rebuilt hotel, they reflect on the journey that had brought them back together. The world they now lived in was far from perfect, but for the first time in decades they had each other, and together they were ready to face whatever hell and heaven had in store for them next.